Here's a rhetorical question. Have you done any playtesting, and how many people actually complete the first levels the way you intended them to?
Look, that's the biggest problem, and that's exactly what I'm talking about right now. Almost no one completes the tutorial in the cheaper countries, so I still haven't found an answer to that yet.
You're really raising the difficulty threshold a lot. Have you tried slowing down the movement of the game blocks by half? You could make the game easier and more enjoyable, make it less hardcore and more meditative, and maybe gradually increase the speed with each level, or the speed at which the blocks fall. Give the player more time to aim so they can understand where they're jumping and where they're flying and so on. There's this thing in platformers, I know this isn't a platformer, but still, where the game helps the player make the right move. For example, when you're running on a platform and you've already run off it a little, just by a few pixels, but you jump and the game still lets you make the jump. This is especially common in modern games. It's a very widespread mechanic. Yeah, but look, this can be expressed in different ways, but most likely this is something that should be present in a game like this. It gives the player more confidence in their abilities. So even if they made a slightly wrong jump somewhere, just a little bit, like for example they jumped, and you can calculate that the trajectory of their jump will lead them to land on a spike sticking out of the wall. And if you look at, say, a 5-degree deviation to the left or right, and within that range there's a way to save them from the spike. For example, if we shift their jump 5 degrees to the left, there's a way to save them, then just shift it for them. So the player won't really notice that the game is helping them out a lot, but nevertheless it will, let's say, give the player more confidence. So this kind of thoughtful user assistance can truly make the game more enjoyable for the player and effectively lower the entry barrier without fundamentally reducing its hardcore nature. Next, the second to last point is about additional mechanics that deviate from the core mechanics. For example, when I reach a certain height. Well, for example, not at every height, but at every third height, there could be, as you mentioned, some kind of black hole or a door or just an object that I need to break, and then I end up in a boss room. The whole fight takes place on a single screen. I don't run anywhere, but the boss will be there too. For example, he's huge, 5 times bigger than me, jumping around the map and throwing some kind of zucchinis. And I'll be using exactly those moves that I have in my main core mechanics to somehow hit this boss or hit the zucchinis he throws, which will bounce back at him or something like that. Then there's also a small variation, which is horizontal segments. So, for example, we're riding along a vertical pipe. Why not, for instance, make it so that sometimes this pipe bends a little, say, for about 10 meters and then straightens out again? That way I'd get some really good variety in the overall game experience. The core mechanics would change a little bit. At the same time, your jumps would still be there, which are actually really cool and have that satisfaction factor, especially when you pull them off well and correctly. I really liked the core mechanics themselves. The only thing I disliked was the difficulty, and the game didn't help. And also what I'm telling you right now, that's absolutely everything that I wanted to say to you. And the game is great. A lot of work has been put into it. The core gameplay itself is quite enjoyable, but the game really messes with the player quite a bit. Action required. You need to lower, or rather ease the entry threshold, maybe help the player out somewhere. You could tweak it a bit, maybe by about 10%. It's already quite great by 90%, and with about 10% more dedicated work, you could truly make it 2 or even 3 times more interesting and engaging.
Thank you very much. Tell me, how do you feel about the visuals? I've received comments that the backgrounds are too complex, that the relaxed vibe confused or distracted people. Did you feel that way?
For me, no, it wasn't a problem. I didn't notice anything particularly remarkable about it. It's clear to me where the block is. I don't confuse the background with the block. Overall, everything in that regard was acceptable to me.
My advice, don't stress about the backgrounds and so on. They're fine as they are.
Here's what I came up with. What if you get double rewards for picking up fruits in the air and show it somehow so it's fun?
I was also thinking of adding some tricks, but I haven't figured out which ones yet.
With the stopping platform, if you catch it in the air, that's cool too, right? Double rewards for fruits.
I think the ideas you're suggesting are honestly really great. They're quite common and they could really help. But let's just be honest here. There's a big problem with the core mechanic. All these minor improvements either make the core mechanic more complicated or distract from the main issue. I believe that the game should be fun to play specifically at the level of its core mechanics. I mean, we all have games that we love to come back to, not because we're at some millionth level, but just because it's fun to play them. There's some kind of movement, something satisfying, something happening. If we add these little bounces at the edge of the platform here, if we give double rewards, let's be honest, will the core mechanics actually get better? Will it really become more interesting to play?
I agree with most of what Zhenya said. I agree as well. I support that. As for the tutorial itself, perhaps I didn't quite hear what the other guys were actually saying about it. This is in support of what Anton is saying. So basically the mechanic itself is quite complex, and it's unclear why sometimes the double swipe works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes the movement to the side doesn't work either. And this, even at the tutorial stage, starts to get annoying because it looks like a bug. And as a direct result of this, you truly don't fully understand why you simply cannot save yourself, why you are unable to get away from these continuously falling obstacles. And most likely, that's the main reason people don't get through the first tutorial. Well, the fact that you fixed it and moved the camera already helps, because at first you couldn't see the ball at all. If we touch upon the interesting topic of graphics, yes, the visual graphics are actually really quite cool, but unfortunately you still can't clearly see your character, the eye. So maybe at the beginning you could do some kind of focus and the camera could, say, pull back from your eyeball. When I was playing on one phone, by the way, you just mentioned that you have vibration. For the experiment, I tried it on a second phone.
No vibration.
It doesn't work well on Android.
Vibration, and sometimes in some projects it actually annoys me a bit. That's exactly what was missing here, and maybe in some places a shake effect when you do a super destruction move. There's just not enough of a sense that you've actually done something.
On my Samsung, the vibration works well. The only thing is it's pretty weak.
Well, let's start from the very beginning. I don't know, maybe you should be a bit more careful with that logo because it threw me off a little. I would give that some more thought. At some point I was going through the tutorial and basically ran into the issue that when I tried to move or go up, I just couldn't do it at all. Let's put it this way. Since the game is dynamic after all, I wouldn't put any restrictions. Let people enjoy themselves. I was trying to figure out what this game reminds me of. And my daughter has a game like that. She plays it. I wanted, let's say, a similar kind of behavior. For example, I'm just observing what Zhenya is talking about. It's a play test. And we watch together how my kids play, how long they get absorbed, whether they feel any aversion to the game, to losing, or to difficult moments. Playtesting is essential, otherwise you won't realize you're making the game just for yourself. But you're so involved in it that you don't see the mistakes.
Sasha, you need to pause the game the first time you get caught in a trap and show the user how to do it. I just happened to notice at the top since I was looking at the bottom of the screen, and then an icon appeared at the top, with a hammer drawn on it. So I clicked on that hammer and figured out what it was because you had mentioned that there was something like that, and I managed to get out of the trap. That was all really cool. But the tutorial for this trap, for getting out of the trap, only started when I clicked on the hammer. It would be better if, as soon as I fall into the trap, the game pauses and points to the hammer so that the player immediately learns how to get out of these traps.
Sasha, look, about the tutorial, Zhenya mentioned the pause. Basically, I had the same solution in mind from the start. That is, at each stage of the tutorial, some phrases stay on the screen for quite a long time. The swipe hint stays on the screen for too long, even when it's no longer relevant. So it's best to pause the gameplay and let the player perform the required gesture, and then release it, because otherwise it just lingers for too long. And not all mechanics are revealed right away. The hints stay on screen long. You don't understand whether you've done it or not. For example, look, I'm playing already going up to the second or third floor, and I still have the hint on the screen. What I mean is, you need to approach it as a player who's starting over for the first time, look at it from a different perspective. There are a lot of moments that are drawn out. So what's the suggestion? We have a goal, right? We know up to which boundary line we need to climb, correct? I would suggest that you consider this kind of option. So basically, we first draw this boundary line, then the camera moves down to the spawn point, where your eye appears and starts to animate in a way that hints, hey, let's start playing already. Start from this line, the one you need to reach. You have this interesting part where you climb upwards. It's like two different mechanics. And then there's also this rescue mode available. And maybe it should be separated at the beginning, because right now there's no separation. You just switch from one mechanic to another. You haven't even figured out the first one yet, and the next one is already coming at you. Visually, it's cool. Let me put it this way. There are no issues with the visuals. And as for the visuals, the only suggestion I have is that there's a lack of a sense of connection with your character. I would put in some effort and add a bit more animation. And at the moment when your eye ends up in an enclosed space with no way out, it should signal that it wants to escape somehow, so that the player really feels anxious and stressed about it and tries to avoid getting into that situation next time. By the way, about the UI, right now the UI popped up and it got a bit stretched out on your end. So it should still be positioned somehow from the center, and in some places, for example, the hand could already be replaced with some kind of pulsation, with buttons, or a running highlight. I ended up in, what is this, some kind of battle pass, right? It wasn't immediately clear to me how to exit from here. This part of the screen, somehow this close button got a bit lost. Maybe at a slight fade underneath. I didn't immediately understand what I was supposed to do here. By the way, this is exactly where a tutorial is missing. It seemed to me that the game has good potential. Everything we've discussed is present here. These are definitely objective points that need to be fixed, and then you should keep an eye on the funnels to see where your drop-off, so to speak, will decrease.
Sasha, is there some kind of non-burnable height?
No, it's a standard mechanic where you...
But I wish there was one.
Do you have analytics by floors? Up to which floor do people get?
Where the blocks start to fall, I consider that the end of the tutorial. If we're talking about regular users, only about half of them get through it. Well, 60% make it through what I consider the tutorial.
Within the tutorial, where do you see the biggest drop-off?
There isn't one. There's no significant drop-off. They drop off gradually, more or less evenly. That's if we are talking about the typical users that I would consider to be normal, everyday individuals.
I found some old Huawei of mine. Basically, on it, I don't remember how much RAM it has. I noticed that the phone started heating up quite a lot. There were even some unpleasant freezes apparently because of the parallax and those effects, and the rendering slowed down a bit. All in all, I went through this tutorial 3 or 4 times. In my opinion, there's a lack of, let's say, a restriction on double swiping. That's one of the reasons. So basically, you have to climb up to pretty high floors. You just don't have nearly enough time to fully recharge your energy when you unfortunately fall, and basically you're truly missing that crucial extra jump, so to speak, and consequently, you just absolutely can't get out of the situation. And it turns out to be funny, like you said, your core mechanic is falling. Let's call it this Tetris, right? You added the tutorial as additional mechanics, and these additional mechanics end up breaking things. People don't even get to your core mechanic. Try to experiment, so to speak. Well, maybe add 1 or 2 extra recharges. Overall, the game also seemed quite original and unique to me. I haven't really seen any direct analogs or comparable titles in the market. The core idea is good. At times, you can really feel that there was one idea, then another was added, but sometimes they don't quite connect. There are some rough spots, so to speak, moments that feel unfinished. Not everything is clear and its purpose not obvious. Overall, it looks great. Just a bit more polishing left, and I think you'll see the results.
Thanks again. Thank you.
Sasha, once again, I want to praise you for the game. The design is interesting. The game feels original. It really feels like a breath of fresh air. But as I said, as the saying goes, don't listen to anything before the but. Only pay attention to what comes after the but. So there's a high entry barrier. You need to refine the clarity of the UI UX a bit so that your player understands what they're being rewarded for, what they're being punished for, and what each soft currency does, since you have several of them. Now explain the hammers as soon as you find yourself trapped, caught in a trap, or covered by some shelf, and I think this will really bring you much closer to success.
Thank you very much. Honestly, it was very helpful to look at the game from an outside perspective. It's not that I haven't tried to do this before. I have tried. I tried to get some feedback from all my acquaintances, but I found that it's hard to get anything reasonable, any meaningful review, which I was able to get here. And for that, thank you very much.
I'll wrap things up. The game is interesting. If you manage to get the first day retention rate up to 35% or higher, then you can definitely start acquiring users, maybe do some test acquisitions, and you might break even or make a small profit. You can even do it with 30%, sure. But you're not making a game just to earn $100, right? A game should earn at least 3,000 to 4,000 so that you can confidently and calmly move on to the next one. There are prospects. There are games that have very little chance. This game does have a chance. That's my feedback from a business perspective. Friends, thank you all for watching us. Please like and subscribe to our channel. With that, we're going to sign off. Thank you very much, Sasha.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Bye-bye.